I feel like I'm in the wrong chair. I know, I feel like it's shifted out. I feel like this week they're supposed to be here. There we are. Okay, just so you know. Right, I was like, okay. All right, everybody, let's begin for tonight. Good evening and welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting for August 6th, 2024. And we will begin tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a couple of quick announcements. That this meeting may be audio and video recorded by third parties. We're also live streaming on our YouTube channel, and there are extra copies of the agenda in the back of the room for anybody who would like one. And with that, we will begin our public comment period. Is anybody in attendance tonight, would anyone like to make a public comment or ask a question regarding something that is not on tonight's agenda? Yes, Mr. Golan.
Charlie Golden, West Goshen. I'll be quick. Just a couple of follow-ups from the last meeting I attended. Real quick, Mr. Bayshore, IPMC, the International Property Maintenance Code, and I-Code, you said we adopted it. Did we adopt it through an ordinance? How did we adopt it?
The Board of Supervisors adopted it through an ordinance, I believe, in 1998, and then re-adopted it in 2004. It's Chapter 61 of our Code of Ordinances.
Okay. So what do you do with the rewrites, the 2021 rewrite on the IPMC, the 2024 coming up?
The ordinances are written in such a way that it adopts any new version that's approved by the International Code Council.
Yeah, I was afraid of that answer. So there's a lot of things that sneak in since the 2020, I won't say since the 2020 election, that sneak into the 2021. So I'll take a look at that with our watchdog group. We'll take a look at that with the 2021 and certainly the present 2024, what's been proposed, and see what's changed there. But they have gotten very aggressive.
I don't think they're following the latest position.
2018.
They're following the 2018.
I apologize, Chapter 63.
Okay.
They're following the 2018.
And that's in general, right? I mean, we're following what the states adopted in 2018. If they adopted 2024, then...
But it's different. So the statewide building, if you go to the Department of Labor and Industry website, it will tell you what codes published by the ICC are part of the statewide building code. It does not include the property maintenance code. So by the township opting into the statewide building code, which it had the option to do, and it did, it must now adopt every ICC code that the state dictates is the statewide building code. And the state determines which edition, 2018, 2021, is the statewide building code. That law we don't have the ability to change. The property maintenance code is something that the board has the discretion to approve or not approve and can choose to adopt whichever version they want to adopt.
Right, my only concern as a resident is they're getting very aggressive. The 2024 code is more aggressive than the 2021 code. And it's something that we as residents have to take a look at and see, oh, what are they telling us we can and can't do with our property? It's like being in a homeowners association almost. Okay, well, I got my answer, so thank you very much. Great answer. Charge point. We mentioned last meeting $3,700 fee for charge point. So I'm kind of curious how the whole charge point system works. I asked somebody who was charging their car, and they said, well, you need a charge point car, and I guess they're paying. So are we making money on the charger located out front for the public?
Yes. They pay for the electricity, and it's utilized then to pay for the electricity charges for the charging stations.
So then ChargePoint collects that money and then sends us a check?
Yes.
So why are we paying them a $3,700 maintenance fee? They're already making some of that money.
That's for 3 years, and the rate per kilowatt hour is pretty low, and we've had situations with them where we've had to replace equipment that would have been exponentially more expensive than that fee.
Okay. It's kind of a good answer. I understand. It's like, I understand.
Like, for example, one of the chargers had a motherboard fail about 3 weeks ago, and it was completely covered under that maintenance fee.
Okay. Okay. And how did we land on ChargePoint?
That was before my time. I can't answer that question, but they are, I believe they're through CoStars.
Are they?
I believe they are. I could be wrong, but I know we got a grant through, the township got a grant through the Volkswagen settlement, and that's how we installed
That's
3
right.
of the chargers.
Mm-hmm.
Because is ChargePoint going to be in our life from now on? We install more and more and more. Are they all going to be ChargePoint?
I
Do we
don't
know?
know the answer to that question.
I mean,
Because I looked up ChargePoint on my Fidelity, and they say sell the stock. It's down to 1.76, $1.76 from $49. So apparently ChargePoint has some real struggles there. So I would just say, hey, just take note. I'm not sure if ChargePoint will be around the next time we do a round of chargers. We might have a few different kind out there. I don't know.
Mhm.
All right, thank you.
Good, thank you. Are there any other public comments? No? Okay.
Actually, if I may.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually just want to have one comment tonight, related to the upcoming Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission is announced that there are public input hearings for the proposed rate increase by Aqua PA and Aqua PA wastewater. So there's a proposal to increase water and wastewater charges to all users of their water and wastewater systems. The Chester County hearing will begin at 1 p.m. in the new Goshen Township Municipal Building at 299 Star Road in Landenberg. And there are also telephonic public hearing meetings scheduled, which are on Wednesday, August the 14th, one at 1 p.m. and one at 6 p.m. The information is available on the PUC press release website if anyone's interested in attending. I personally will be attending to have some public comments at the meeting on Thursday. There'll be my personal comments and not a statement by the board. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, just, what are they proposing, Sean? Do you, it's like an 18% increase, something like that?
It's very confusing. It depends what your usage is, and it's different zones of areas. Geography is going to have different rate increases, but in general, overall, it's about a 20% increase.
So it's a substantial increase.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim.
That's Aqua Water, Sean?
Aqua, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so moving on to item number 4, which is the discussion of the 2023 financial audit for West Goshen Township with BBD Inc. And I believe we have a representative from BBD here tonight.
short little presentation. I don't have the full document with me now. I'll try to answer any questions kind of for a little bit prior to coming here tonight. So if you had any questions as you were going through it, just let me know. Like I said, this is kind of, unfortunately, audits are always a historical perspective, and I know everybody's looking forward to the budget for 2025 already. We're already halfway through 2024, but this will kind of give you a framework of where you are as of December 31st, 2023, and moving forward into 2024 and beyond. So we just put a couple slides together to kind of give everybody just a flavor of what we did during the audit and what our procedures encompassed, and that basically as part of our audit we are engaged to audit several different reports that are then provided to management and the board supervisors. And the first one is the main audit document, which is the one that presents the financial statements of the township in accordance with GAAP. There is a regulatory filing that needs to be done with the state for the Department of Community and Economic Development, and this needs to be filed by April 1st of every year, and this was filed by April 1st. We also issue a report on the sewer and sewer reserve funds in accordance with GAAP. We also audit the pension funds of the township, which are the police, the non-uniformed, and the sewer pension funds. We also audit the tax collector on the cash basis of accounting. The books and records are maintained on the cash basis, not generally accepted accounting principles. And then also in the current year was the first year we were auditing your blended component unit for the sewer authority, which are also presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So the timeline of where we started at, preliminary audit procedures were conducted in January. Field work was performed in March, so we could file that report with the Department of Community and Economic Development by April 1st. And then the final reports were issued in June, all of the reports that were up above. And then as you note down there below, the regulatory filing was met in accordance with the state guidelines. So each one of the reports that we issued has what we call an independent auditor's report within them. And they're all kind of broken out the same with the same types of paragraphs kind of highlighting different areas. Each one of the reports that we issued had an unmodified audit report, basically a boilerplate report, no kind of modifications to the report or indicating any kind of qualifications or adverse opinions. So that's what you want. You want the plain, vanilla, boilerplate report with no modifications. Everything else in the report has remained the same. Our responsibilities haven't changed. Your responsibilities haven't changed in the report. I do want to point out the required supplementary information. Even though this is the one section of the regular township generally accepted accounting principles report that we don't provide an opinion on because it consists of management's discussion and analysis and some actuarial information in the back of the audit report. I think it's some of the most important information in the financial statements just because of the fact that management's discussion analysis gives management the ability to talk about what happened during 2023, but in addition, since it's a historical document, to talk about what's happened so far in 2024 and 2025, and spares everybody from having to read all 60, 70 pages of the audit document. So if I was going to look at the audit document related to the township, I would focus on management's discussion and analysis. Also, there's some really good information related to some budgetary comparison schedules within the audit. I know that's the main thing you do during the year. You have a budget, you put out a budget at the beginning of the year. You want to see how you ended up and see how everything kind of played out during the year. A lot of things changed during the year. There's a lot of things that couldn't be anticipated, especially with revenues over the past couple of years we'll talk about. In particular, what I'm seeing at a lot of my townships is, continued strength within earned income taxes, kind of a fade off of the realty transfer taxes during 2023. Even though you guys did good to budget on that, and then also a lot of things that kind of will people off guard in terms of the interest rates and then being elevated for all 2023. I know they went up in 2022. We were able to anticipate that a little bit, but then they continue to stay at that elevated rate. And with the deposits you have, so that was better than anticipated. And then the final section of the auditor's report talks about our requirements under government auditing standards. Because this year, also you expended in excess of $750,000 of rescue plan funds during the year. We also had to do a single audit. We have a slide on that tonight. So just to talk about our audit approach, just sort of as I think we've touched base on this in the past, everything is a risk assessment, risk-based approach. We can't look at every single document, every single piece of paper. We'd be here forever looking at everything. So our standards require us to do a risk assessment and kind of identify those areas that we feel have the most could raise a potential for an error or misstatement in your financial reporting. So as the part of that risk assessment, we start with documenting what your internal controls are. We make inquiries of management, staff, and board members. Then we do analytical procedures. We do a review of the current and prior year audit reports. And once we do this, develop our risk assessment, fill out all our paperwork, we design audit procedures to focus on audit areas of higher risk. So a lot of things that we focus on here in terms of higher risk areas are, we look at payroll, we look at your cash disbursements, we look at any kind of billings related to sewer billings, etc. And we kind of do calculations with that. We look at your actuarial reports, any kind of estimates associated with them to make sure they're reasonable. So there's a whole gamut of things that we look at in terms of those areas that we consider they're higher risk. As part of our other procedures we do review your meeting minutes, contracts, other agreements, and then there's substantive audit procedures where we test the details of all of your assets, liabilities, equity, revenues, and expenditures. So here's what the fund balance results are with a little graph there on the right-hand side. So for the current year, and this is kind of shown in detail in the auditor's report, the general fund did have an increase in its fund balance of $3.1 million over the prior year. $20.4 million of the $24.4 million fund balance is unassigned as of 12/31/2023. Within the rest of the fund balance is either assigned, committed, or restricted for other purposes. The township also has a capital reserve fund, and that had an increase in its fund balance of $417,000. Transfers in and revenues exceeded capital allowance every year. The township makes an appropriation over to the capital reserve fund, a part of its budget process. And in the current year, those transfers in and revenues, primarily interest revenues, did exceed what the planned budgeted capital projects were. It's kind of weird with the capital reserve fund. I know you put a budget up, but there's different variations. It's kind of a bit different than the general fund in terms of you don't know how your capital projects are going to go and the timing, etc. So that's the kind of fund that can kind of fluctuate and kind of not be in basically can veer away from the budget on an annual basis just because of all the unknowns that can happen during the year. And then finally, you do have some other funds that include the townships, the ARPA fund that we just talked about. $1.2 million was expended during the current year related to these funds. And what triggers that single audit I just talked about before is when you expend over $750,000. So that triggered this single audit. So also, you have about $900,000 that's considered deferred for future years related to the ARPA funds as well. So in theory, if that's all spent in 2024, obligated, we'll have a single audit again for the current year. So here's the general fund budgetary comparison schedule. When you look at it, everything was kind of being driven by revenues and expenditures. And when you look at it as a percentage, everything was, when you look at the total budget of the township, and you look at actual revenues being in excess of 1.8 and expenditures being under budget by about $1.6 million, that's a good percentage in relation to the total budget for the township. But as you can see up at the top, the $1.8 million, and this is very similar to previous years. Across Pennsylvania, a lot of municipalities, the excess revenues over expenditures are being driven by the revenues the past couple of years. And in the case of the township, you have the interest income, $668,000, more than anticipated. Charges for services, a lot of that being driven by development within the township. Real estate transfer taxes, so when you did, once again, conservatively budget for that line item, I noticed that a lot of my municipalities, a lot of my townships, even though we've seen a lot of increases in earned income taxes and real estate transfer taxes, you got to be totally conservative with those types of revenues because you never know. They're kind of highly volatile and could go back the other way at any given point in time. So even though you have been seeing those increases in any given year, and that's good to continue to be conservative in budgeting those amounts. Also, there was a budgeted transfer of $1.3 million over to the capital reserve fund, and as we just discussed, that was that plus the interest was in excess of what was spent during the current year. And then also the budget included the planned use of $343,000 of fund balance. However, the results were actually a positive result of $3.1 million, predominantly being driven by those revenues being more than budget and the expenditures being less than budget, which were kind of spread out. There was nothing really specific in terms of within the different departments. They were kind of spread out within the different departments related to expenditures. So it's also as part of our audit, we also audit what we call the proprietary funds. Now, these are separate from the governmental funds because they are totally financed or funded by separate charges for services for each one of the individual components. So in the case of the township, you have the sewer fund, you have the waste and recycling fund, and the waste and then the recycling fund as well. And the sewer authority is the green line item right over there, which we did audit as a component unit during the current year. So the net position of the sewer fund was $7.7 million. The waste, solid waste or waste and recycling fund was $1.3 million, and then the sewer authority net position was $36.7 million. And you can see those increases in that position in relation to the previous year. Now, when you're looking at it, especially as it relates to the sewer authority was created to, construct and to acquire capital assets on behalf of the sewer fund. So most of that $36 million, what you're seeing there is predominantly the township's investment in capital assets. So that's why that number is so high. There's some capital assets within some of the other funds, but buildings and the major infrastructure of the sewer fund are maintained in the sewer authority fund, and then the actual operations of the sewer fund or the sewer operations are within the sewer fund, which is the collection and the payment of the personnel, non-personnel costs related to the running of the operations. So also another big part of our audit is the pension plans, and this is a big part of your audit on an annual basis in terms of, what do we have to fund the pension, what is the state going to give us, and what do we need to fund our pension plans on any given basis. Just recently, especially because of the good investment results during 2023, so we kind of saw a little dip in 2022 in the plans and how much they were funded, but as you can see here, the police pension plan was almost 98% funded. Non-uniform pension plan was funded at 87%, and then the sewer pension plan was at 90%. So that's a good situation because that kind of impacts where you're going to have to fund each one of these funds on an annual basis. So that's a good thing in terms of it kind of gives you some kind of respite in terms of those budgeting items on an annual basis. So every year you do a MMO calculation and they take into account the percentage funded, and I think the state looks at the percentage funded. I think 80%, 75 to 80%, if I'm not correct, is considered a healthy funded pension fund, well above those amounts. You also have a OPEB plan, predominantly for your police officers. This is, the cost associated with providing post-employment benefits to retired employees and also to those employees. It makes a actuarial estimate of what's going to cost to, pay these types of benefits to existing employees as well. This liability that's sitting on the books, the future costs related to people that are currently receiving the benefits and in the future is $5.6 million. It's a big number on a lot of townships' books related to their police. And relatively speaking, $5.6 million, I've seen a lot larger numbers in terms of OPEB plan liabilities, in terms of different townships' police. Some townships will want to fund this liability in the future, kind of like you have to do with your pension. But the township has made the determination what they want to do is we're just going to fund this liability as the payments come due. So if the payments come due related to the retirees on a monthly basis and just paid on a monthly basis, and it's not funded in advance. So there's certain things that we need to report to you as we have a requirement to make certain communications with the board on an annual basis. The first thing, the most important thing is there was no significant difficulties in dealing with management or even performing or completing the audit. Everything that we asked for was provided to us. We did have some waived entries related to GASB statement number 87 for leases and statement number 96. There's a new GASB for subscription-based information technology arrangements. So basically what this is saying is that there are some front-level statements that we capture the future payments related to leases and to these subscriptions. We made the determination with management that these amounts were clearly immaterial to the financial statements, and they're pretty lengthy disclosures, and would require a lot of time for a number that was not material, and we decided not to record those in the financial statements. There were no material audit entries. Once again, pretty much what we received at the beginning. There may be some audit entries that come in during the process, but there was nothing that we have to present to management that's material. We had no disagreements with management. Once again, good cooperation, and we did review the results of the audit with management before this presentation here tonight. So the last slide, just to talk about the federal funds. So this is something, basically, the thing where you're going to notice is there's about 5-6 extra pages on your audit report this year. So we had about the $1.2 million that was spent in the federal funds. You're required at $750. I don't know the exact date, but they are raising it to $1 million. I think the federal government's trying to limit the amount of federal audits. I think they've been kind of overwhelmed recently with the number of federal audits, so they're going to raise the threshold to $1 million. They just raised it to $750 from $500 a couple of years ago, but I think they need to kind of weed them out a little bit more. The compliance requirements were evaluated, and we had an unmodified opinion on compliance. The internal controls over the compliance with these funds as well were also evaluated, and we had no findings. And like I spoke about before, your major program was the COVID-19 state and local recovery fund. So the good news about this is even when we audit our other townships, audit our school districts, these funds are really monitored not only by us, but by the county and different other state agencies. So it makes our job easy. So not only are we looking at it, they're looking at it, and it just makes the for a pretty smooth process within these funds. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Yeah.
Do any board members have any questions? Go ahead.
I had a question relative to the sewer and the sewer, actually. In your slide relative to the 36 million for recent year compared to last year, did that include any grant money, or how's the grant accounted for in any of the totals, actually?
Are you talking about the sewer authority? Because the sewer
Yeah.
authority is I don't know if the top sewer authority grant for the sewer like that.
Yeah, we had grants last year, it's
That would
several.
all be in the revenues, so not necessarily, your net position's looking at your overall.
Yeah. So that would account for the increase of, because that grant revenue was used for capital items.
Exactly,
So,
yeah, it was a
so-
couple million.
Yeah, so what happens is, that's why your net position increased so much, because there's no offsetting expenditure, because it's getting capitalized and then depreciated over the life of the asset. So over whatever, however long we depreciate the asset for, that's, be 20, 30, 40 years. So it'll kind of, the asset will depreciate over whatever the estimated useful life will be.
Okay, so it's originally looked at as revenue, I guess.
Yeah,
Revenue.
As
yeah.
when grants come in, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it has revenue on the income statement, and then it hits the other side of the entry is the balance sheet, and at that point, we'll, depreciate it over its useful life.
Okay, thank you.
So, any other questions?
Yes, I have some questions. I have 2 questions and 1 comment.
Yep.
On the notes to the financial statements, which is page 39, under capital assets, it's stated that capital assets are defined by the township as assets with an initial individual cost of $5,000 or more and an estimated useful life in excess of 1 year. In your work with various clients, etc., do you find this number to be too low at this point in time? It's been this way for many years. Should we be looking to raise the amount at which we capitalize something?
I can tell you right now, management would be like, we would love to look at a higher rate, because it would be less tracking on their part, because this size of township, I would think, it's been like that, like I was saying last year, I did this audit way back in the day, and I think it was 5,000 back then, and, just the amount of time and effort and the cost benefit of, tracking something at $5,000 might not be worth it now compared to back then, so.
Are we looking at that, Chris?
Certainly.
I presume the board would have to approve that change.
I believe that would be a policy determination for the board that we could probably look at during budget.
I mean, it would be a total administrative relief, I know, for, the county staff, I know for a fact. Because having to track things being put on, and then also, deleting things, and, is this still here and stuff, so.
Okay, so that's at our discretion then, really, it's a management's discretion.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important things you need to be tracking are obviously vehicles, major equipment,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily need to be tracking, every kind of, something that might come in at like $5,000 at this day and age.
Okay. My second question is related to your assessment of internal controls over financial reporting, etc. So in your audit, did you find anything with respect to our internal controls that you believe you've seen better practices elsewhere with other clients that you would recommend?
I could have talked to the staff that were here, but there was nothing documented in the work papers. You have the luxury of having, a decent sized accounting staff to be able to implement a lot of the internal controls, that, a lot of places would love to have, but just can't have just because of the cost benefit of being smaller. So, you just being a larger township, you're able to implement a lot more of those. And not that I remember us reviewing the work papers before I came here, it was documented. So, but I could follow up with the staff that was out here to see if they have anything that could just make it even a tad better.
Okay. As I said, I had one comment, and that is that under the notes to financial statements related to the pension plans, our target allocation is shown incorrectly in the tables. This is actually what it was a few years ago. We've modified this now. It's a 70-30 allocation between equity and fixed income. So it's just a
Page is that on?
data point. So on page 50, 55, and 59 for the three plans. It just needs to update the table for next year.
What is it at now?
It's 70% equities, which is 47% domestic,
Okay.
23 international, and 30% fixed income.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? No? Are there any questions from members of the public on this report? Hearing none? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to item number 5, which is the mid-year 2024 budget review and discussion. And we have Ms. Ricky here with us today, who I guess I'll turn it over to you to present the mid-year budget review.
Sure. I presented a table that outlines all of the variances that we're seeing at this point in the year, as well as a couple sheets outlining any of the analysis that we did as for what the difference in the trending was. I don't know if there's any, it's probably easier to see if anybody has any questions, and we can talk about specific points.
Sure. Have all of you, I'm sure all of you have had a chance to look over the report from Christine. Does anybody have any specific questions?
I had a question. On the fire inspection fees, they were noted as under budget in the revenues. And it was temporarily on hold, but if you look at the over budget expenses under zoning professional services, it's the opposite, it said we were above.
So we have been budgeting for fire inspections. We have hired outside, at this time, a third-party provider that is doing some of those inspections, but I don't think that they're quite, maybe Chris can elaborate on this, I don't think they're quite up to the level we were expecting, so we still have that added third-party cost, but we're not seeing the full benefit of the revenue from those expenses.
Okay, so how could it be under and then also over?
Well,
There are two different things.
Okay,
They're two different revenue sources, and they're also doing rental inspections as well.
yeah.
So they're doing the rental and the fire inspection, so the revenue specific, the fire inspection component is down, but the overall cost, because they're also doing the rental component, is where it's up.
Okay. So we don't separate those two categories out, we just clump them into one category? So-
Correct, not in terms of the expense side of budgeting things, it's all one category.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Jim?
Yeah, I was just wondering, the clerical overtime, I guess guess I was confused about that. The overage stems from police clerical support. For the last several years, the police clerical overtime account has been budgeted at a zero balance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that goes back several years. There was a request made for part-time occasional dispatch services where we would have dispatchers cover from other entities, whether it's the county or other municipalities, to cover time when our dispatchers are on vacation or out and things like that, so that our in-house dispatchers didn't have to work overtime to fill those laps in coverage. We're not really seeing it operated that way, so that's where that's stemming from, and that's something we can look at during this budget year. If we're not going to use that occasional dispatch,
Right.
maybe we want to go back to budgeting overtime for
specifically
Yeah.
for the amount of time overtime.
Yeah, versus,
Yeah.
because we are budgeting additional clerical support, from part-time outside parties.
Right, okay. Yeah, that's probably something I would be interested in looking at anyway, by the rest of the board. Thank you.
When the expenses on the budget for conferences and training was $15,000, is there any particular department that's not utilizing that budgetary item there? I mean, for training or conferences? I mean, why is that on the budget?
I would say most of it is probably the admin department. It is spread, a little bit across all departments, but majority of it is probably the administration department. There's conferences that we budget for yearly, and sometimes they just don't line up where we have staff to be able to go. We also budget for, additional trainings that may come up when, new things coming out in our software that we don't always need to utilize, but, we do budget for in the event that something happens. So that's part of, there being a little bit of an underutilization there.
I know, like in the codes department, there's the annual EduCode conference, which is their major conference, and we budgeted multiple employees to go to that this year, but due to events outside of their control, only one could go. So I know that was a contributing factor to this.
I mean, is that something we need to take a look at to encourage folks to participate in training, or is it just we're just over?
Yeah, that's something that we always look at during the budget season. I will also say, really since COVID, we've seen a lot more online conferences and training that I think people are starting to utilize maybe a little bit more than the traditional conference platform, and that's what's sort of maybe hitting an impact there. So we've been refining it over the last few years, but that's something we evaluate every year.
Do you have any questions, Sean?
Yeah, I have two questions. Christine, just remind me, the special police services that is a little over budget
Yeah.
for the revenue side. When we bill the third parties for that service, are we billing it our full rate of cost for the police officers involved?
I believe it's billed off of the extra duty rate, which is a salary combination plus an upcharge for a portion of the, benefits package. And that's receipted into the special police service.
Yeah, and then the expenses that are over budget on the police extra duty, that's because of the things
That's
like
you-
court appearances and those kind of
Yes,
things? Okay.
yeah.
Okay, and then I have a question on the American Rescue Plan Act. Could we finish with the budget itself, or?
Yeah, I guess maybe you don't know the answer to this question, but I know we just looked at the police costs associated with the parks and extra over duty associated depending on the amount of people and all that kind of stuff. I'm just wondering if what we charge is consistent, or have we looked at it in a while for the detailed stuff from the police?
I think that we looked at that not that long ago. It was maybe a couple years ago. I can't remember offhand what that percentage is, but that's something I can look up and get back to you.
Yeah,
And it's something we can definitely talk about during budget when we're getting, our new numbers for what it's gonna be for 2025, those sort of things, we can reevaluate if that percentage is still adequate or if it
Yeah,
needs
I'd
be
like to do
adjusted.
that, because a lot has changed in a couple of
Yeah.
years, and also make sure it's equivalent to what we're charging the public for the parks
Yes.
also,
Mhm.
so it'd be consistent.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, that's it. Nate, did you have any questions? No, okay.
So my question on the American Rescue Plan Act is, by the end of 2024, we have to be obligated to spend the remaining funds. By the way, I noticed there are less than $1 million left, so maybe we'll avoid an audit.
We're close.
Maybe we could avoid an audit.
No, 'cause
if,
That would be
have to be-
nice.
Well, no, they have to be all allocated.
So it's not just allocated, it has to be obligated apparently. So obligated is a different definition. Obligated means
Won't they
under.
be?
So I asked, I spoke with Kim Venzia in Kristen's office, and she's kind of the ARPA expert in Kristen's office. Her interpretation of the word allocate, obligated in the rules, they have to be under contract or to be spent. Now, the likelihood of, if we have these projects in flight, us having to return the money is extremely low, since we can demonstrate we're on a path to do them, but I don't want to be the test case for that. And with the Fresh Meadows project, we do have a scoping meeting with Carroll Engineering tomorrow afternoon to kind of keep that process moving, because we're going to use a portion of that for the lining.
Yeah, that's a really big project, so hopefully we could bring over the balance of that if we need to.
I'm asking staff to just pay attention to this situation, because we've got a fluid situation with the bids that will go out for Government Services Center Basin. We've got a fluid situation with respect to the Fresh Meadows lining, and, you know, we just need to make sure we're on top of it in the second half of the year here to, if we can reach a point of showing that we're contracted and obligated to spend the remaining funds. We won't have to mess with federal audits or, be it test cases, crystal balls, and so that'll be a good thing to avoid.
Well, I know Mark has, I think, 2 proposals already for Fresh Meadows that we're going to be discussing tomorrow with Carroll Engineering through CoStar's vendors. The one issue with the Government Services Center Basin, as the board is aware, has to go through a review with Chester County. And Brian sent, the plans are done for Carroll Engineering, and Brian sent the plans on to his contact at Chester County for review. But that was a while ago, and we haven't really heard anything from them. So I did ask Brian when he gets back from vacation to follow up with them when he returns to find out the status of that, so we can put it out to bid.
Who's that point person who's dealing with it?
I don't remember the individual's name. I know the person he was dealing with retired.
So
there was
it's
a
the same,
transition.
it's the same, okay.
It's a facilities department, Steve Neiman just retired, and I think George Martinez was an interim, so I'm happy to try to find the right person if that's not it.
They just made that appointment official this week, then.
So for those 2 projects, Fresh Meadows and Government Services Basin, did that use up that $700,000 that's still remaining?
Yes, it should. It will use up the balance of everything.
All right.
It was kind of a happy accident that Bulmer Street ended up being as expensive as it did.
I'm sure we could have found another price. Be that as it may.
Did you have any other questions? No, okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Christine. That was very helpful. I was thanking Christine, sorry. Okay. Any members of the public would like to ask any questions? Yes, Mr. Goldman.
So, sorry I'm going to ask this, but where is the legal fees for the Dave Woodward estate lawsuit in this evaluation? There had to be legal fees this past year, some amount of ones.
No, they were not. It's all
They've
covered
been
by
very
insurance.
minor. It's been covered through insurance. Most of it. But we are noting on here that we are expecting to go over a little bit in legal services. That is listed under the expenses over budget section. Mhm.
Any other questions for Christine? No. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number 6, which is the discussion and possible approval of a request for a waiver of land development and a waiver from section 71-6 of the Township Stormwater Management Ordinance for the installation of an ATM pad and enclosure for a project at 1 North 5 Points Road. I think we have some representatives here. Okay. Did you want to come up? And I don't know, I mean, Chris, did you want to introduce this?
Yes, I'm just going to try to make this
Yeah.
full screen.
You can pull it up.
Let's see if I can do that.
evening, I'm Mike Wells from Lynn Architects, for the architect of record for the project. And we're just requesting a waiver for the creation of a small addition to house our ATM. It's 38 square feet, that is over the 500 square foot threshold for land development and stormwater management.
So Madam Chair, just to provide some background on this project, as the gentleman noted, they're requesting a waiver from land development. This is a location at the intersection of North Five Points Road and Westchester Pike. It's a former chiropractor's office. The branch of the BHCU Credit Union is proposed for this site. The property is in the C1 Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District, and the proposed use is permitted by right. And as noted, they are looking to install 38 square foot addition on the existing commercial building for an ATM pad and enclosure. This is similar to vestibule projects and other small additions that have been granted waivers of land development by the board in the past. And under the Township Stormwater Management Code, under section 71(6)(b)(1)(a), regulated activity that involves less than 500 square feet of regulated impervious surfaces and less than 5,000 square feet of earth disturbance would be exempt from the requirements. I did speak with Mr. Kolakowski prior to his vacation, and he does not have any objection if the board wishes to waive any of these requirements.
Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. It's 38 square feet. I just have a question. If they're exempt from the requirements, why do we have to waive them?
So it's, I read this right too, it's exempt from stormwater management, they're asking for you to waive the requirement to go through subdivision land development plan for this 38 square foot structure.
Okay.
So the stormwater ordinance, they don't need a waiver, they're already exempt.
Right.
Your subdivision ordinance, technically, the definition of land development includes any improvement to a commercial lot. So even
Okay.
just 38 square feet, there's no exemption for that. So I know I have to read it twice too.
Sorry about that, that's my mistake.
No, it's fine, it's okay, it's good.
So, do any
Just a
members
thought.
of the board object to waiving
Land
these
development.
land development?
I just have a question. What, if any, impact would this have on traffic?
Traffic?
Right.
No impact at all. It's, none at all.
Like it's not a drive-up ATM or anything? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, like a
Sorry,
38
it's not a
feet.
drive up.
Yeah, okay.
I'll make the motion to approve the waiver.
All right, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
I second that.
All right, thanks, Tina. Is there any public comment regarding this proposal? Yes. Yes.
I would agree that you approve it. I've been a bank before with a drive-through and an ATM. It's been through a number of banks,
Okay.
as well as a gas station years ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
So
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, no.
I'd be in agreement for you to approve.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question. Having gone through the whole ordinance for EV things for sub-developments and everything, does this fit that category where they have to have an EV thing?
No.
No.
Okay,
No, just not. Okay,
thanks.
thank you. All right, then.
Your name for the record?
Oh, Bonnie Seola.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for getting us on the agenda tonight, too.
Absolutely, for sure. I know you guys are receiving it pretty soon, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So I believe we have spoken with our manager, Chris Bayshore, and we decided to table item number 7 tonight, which is the discussion regarding the proposals for the time clock issue.
Yes, Madam Chair, there's some additional research I would like to do for the board.
Okay. Do we need a motion to table this? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and move on then. Item number 8, which is the continued discussion regarding a proposed amendment to West Goshen Township zoning ordinance pertaining to the requirements for fences and walls. And I will turn this over to our solicitor.
Right, so at the last meeting, we had a conversation about this, and there were some just changes to some of the language. So I worked with Shelby again, and hopefully we brought back one that is a little more clear. So the definition of fence today includes walls. We took that out. We want to make sure a fence is not a wall, and there's a distinction between a fence and wall. So that's one thing. And then again, we're just you know, again, going through all the rules in 84-47G that identify where fences can be located. The minimum front yard is something you actually don't have. Your area bulk regulations for your districts talk about a building setback line. So that really talks to what is the front yard requirement. So minimum front yard is just language that we think makes sense based on your other terminology. It's hard to just read this section. It sends you, when you read one section, you have to sometimes go to other definitions in the code. So I recognize that sometimes when you read it, you think, okay, but trust me that Shelby and I went through it. She knows the definitions. As somebody files an application, she knows how to measure where the proposed fence is being located and whether it meets these requirements. So that's why some of the terminology, again, we're keeping in mind that there are other defined terms within the code that we're trying to stay consistent with. So just again, identifying if a fence is going to be in the, if it's in the minimum front yard, it can't be higher than 4 feet in height. It has to have a 1-to-1 ratio of open to structural areas. If it's on a through lot, it can be erected, but it cannot exceed 6 feet in height. It shall be constructed of solid wood or vinyl. It has to be in the rear of the dwelling. So in a through lot, remember there's a lot that fronts on 2 streets, but the house still faces one of the streets. So the fence can go behind the house, but if it's going behind the house, the main purpose of why we were allowing that before was because you want to have privacy from the street, you want to protect your backyard from people going onto the street, noise barrier, that kind of thing. So that's why you're allowed to go to the higher 6-foot height. One of the things Shelby asked is whether the board would want to change it and not require it to be a solid wood. I said that that was something when this ordinance came in, the plea from a property owner was, hey, we need a fence in our, quote, backyard. What they view as their backyard, but what the code views as their front yard. So I think about the property on Pottstown Pike, near where the Westland Saddlery is, that development is right next door. That's the property owner that came in and said, hey, our backyard is on Pottstown Pike, and our kids play in our backyard, and under your code, we weren't allowed to have a fence. That's why the change came in for a through lot to allow a fence in the, quote, backyard of their homes. But there, it was, okay, well, if you want a fence, you wanted it because you wanted privacy and protection from the road. So that's why it was allowed to go to a taller height and have it be fully enclosed. So it's a policy decision. I mean, there's nothing to say you can't allow it not to be solid wood or vinyl. If you want it to be a picket fence, you're allowed to do it, but that sort of defeats the purpose of why you were allowing it to begin with. So that's a policy decision. And then it can't be in the right-of-way. Right-of-way is a defined term in your code. And that's, you wouldn't allow, in that case, Pottstown Pike is a state road, so you wouldn't be able to put the fence in their road anyway without an HOP. It can be put into the minimum side and rear yards. Again, there's specific criteria here. It cannot exceed 6 feet. If it's a residential use, it cannot exceed 10 feet for any other use. The fence may be solid, it doesn't have to be solid if it's in the side or rear. And then all fences require a zoning permit regardless of how tall they are. If it's 8 feet in height or taller, it also requires a building permit. And then the addition here to paragraph 5, this is something that really came into issue with the Woodlands of Greystone, because there's a lot of stormwater management easements on private property and private lots, and people wanted to put fences up. But the land development plans required for any easement, actually your solid ordinance says for any easement, there has to be an unobstructed area. So there's 20-foot wide stormwater easements, 10 feet on each side of a property basically, and people wanted to put fences up, but then that would obstruct the ability for the township to go in and maintain that pipe or get to the pipe if they needed to. So this allows it as long as the fence doesn't impede the natural flow of water within the water course, ditch, or swale. It cannot cross the sanitary sewer or stormwater management easement, impede the flow of stormwater, or be placed in a manner to impact site distance or clear site triangles. So that's something that was important that I think Brian has learned through a lot of fence applications within the Woodlands of Greystone. And then the wall section, again, this was one of the things that it started out as looking at the fence section, but it carried over because it's in the same paragraph. So freestanding walls are not permitted in the minimum front yard. Retaining walls are, but they have to meet certain criteria. They can't be taller than 4 feet in height. They have to not obstruct clear sight, and they have to be 10 feet outside of the right of way. Freestanding walls and retaining walls can be built in side and rear yards, provided the wall and any fence or barrier placed on top does not exceed 6 feet in height if it's on a residential lot, and 10 feet if it's on any other type of lot. And again, 4 feet, we're trying to keep it consistent. If you're a retaining wall or freestanding wall, which those are two defined terms. Freestanding wall and retaining walls are two defined terms in your code. If they're 4 feet in height and taller, they require a zoning permit. And if, actually, any kind of wall requires a building permit. So 4 feet in height or taller requires a zoning permit and a building permit. And the same language about not impeding natural flow of water, site distance, that kind of thing. That's in there as well for walls. So trying to keep some of the standards consistent between fences and walls, but making sure the definitions are clear on what's a fence and what's a wall.
Okay.
So definitely took a lot longer than we thought this would take, but that seems to always be the case.
Okay, so I just want to be clear, I'm just looking under fences. So if you want to put a fence in your front yard,
And that's front yard as defined in zoning ordinance, not like what's in front of your house. Your minimum front yard is where from the right-of-way line or from your lot line to where you're not allowed to put any structure, your building setback line. So it's usually like 40 feet, say. So from your edge of your lot line to 40 feet back is where you can't.
okay.
So you can, if it's 4 feet, doesn't exceed 4 feet, and it's not solid.
Okay, so let's
That
say you
makes
live in
sense.
a house with a big front yard
Yeah.
and the setback is 40 feet. If you want to put a fence, that fence has to be a picket fence.
Only if it's in the first 40 feet of your lot. If it's 50 feet off of the lot line, you can do whatever you want. Does that make sense? The minimum front yard is
Yeah.
what your building setback is. So normally in the residential districts, you need to be 40 feet off of your lot line. So
To
from the
build
lot
your-
line back, 40 feet.
So the first 40 feet.
First 40 feet
0
of your
to
lot.
40 feet, you could have a 4-foot tall picket fence. From 41 feet.
Back to where you
You
want.
could have a 6-foot vinyl
Yeah.
privacy fence.
Right.
Makes sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Is the property line the curb line of the courtway, or?
It
is
depends.
right of way?
It depends. Everybody's lot line. So my lot, because my township owns the road, 50 feet of the road, my lot line is the edge of the 50 feet where the road is. Some people that live on Pottstown Pike, their deed goes to center line of Pottstown Pike,
So according to what the.
according to the deed, yeah.
We found that situation at the property on Grove Road, their right-of-way line went to the center.
Center line of Grove Road.
And then as Kristen mentioned, the portion where it says the fence shall be constructed in those 3 lots, we have a lot of people coming in and wanting to do a split rail, keep their children and their dogs in, and still back up to that roadway, or that, the really big one right now is that aluminum picket fence, that black aluminum style picket fence. So I had mentioned to Kristen about changing it from the fence shall be constructed to the fence may be constructed. To give them that, if they're looking to just enclose their yard to keep things contained versus, looking at the privacy and the noise.
So you're looking under 2B, you're saying 2B should change the word shall to may?
2B, yep.
Okay.
I have one other suggested change. It's just to be consistent, because when I first read it, I was confused. I think I understand it now. So in fences, number 4, we say all fences, regardless of height, require a zoning permit. I'd like to see the same regardless of height added to number 3 under walls. I think I got that right. All freestanding walls, regardless of height, and retaining walls which are 4 feet in height or taller, require a zoning permit. That is correct, right? Any
No,
wall-
you only need a zoning permit if a wall or retaining wall is 4 feet in height or taller.
Is it both all freestanding walls or just retaining walls that are 4 feet?
Freestanding walls and retaining walls, 4 feet in height or taller, require a zoning permit.
So a freestanding wall of 3 feet does not require a zoning permit?
That's correct.
I had a question too, I have a lot, but I'll just ask a few. Under fence, it says it's a structure of wood, stone, metal, plastic, and so forth. What if I have a concrete, it consists of concrete?
That's a wall then, it's not a fence.
And how do I know that here?
There's a definition of wall that you're not seeing here, it's in the code.
Okay. And then.
And that's where today, this is why we're changing it. Your definition of fence today includes a wall, which made then no sense why you have a paragraph on fences and walls if the definition of fence included walls. That's why we took what you would think of a wall out of the definition of fence.
So if I'm going to construct my fence instead of stone, I want to use cement, it would be considered a wall?
If it's a structure that's fully cement, yes.
Okay. And then do we need a definition of minimum front yard?
No, you don't, because it's
It's
in the
B4B
code.
definition.
If you look at the definition of building setback, and look at the definition of yard and front yard, you'll have, it makes,
Is that the same with front yard thorough lot?
through lot.
Through lot?
There's a separate definition, it's actually under lot coming through. It's how often I've looked at it.
Okay, so-
Lots of, each kind of lot is defined, corner lot, through lot, you know, they're all defined.
In another document?
In the
840.
definition section of the
Okay.
zoning ordinance.
And we don't need to reference any of that, because people automatically know that that's where you have to go.
Yeah, these are all, this is one section of the zoning code. So when you go to this section, if there's a definition, if there's a word, you go back to the definitional section in 84-8.
'Cause it's
That
the
is
same
all the
section.
definitions.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, that's it.
And every time that Shelby gets a zoning matter, that's what she's doing. She's looking at, okay, this is the section that gives me the regulations, and then there's words in there that are defined, and she has to go back to 84-8 to see what those definitions are. That's how you sort of piece it together.
Yeah, I'm still got a problem with the difference between fences and walls when it comes to the height requiring a zoning permit. So
I think-
the way I read this now, all fences, so a 3-foot high fence would require a zoning permit, but a 3-foot high wall does not.
It does.
Yeah, I think the idea, no, it doesn't. The idea was that people were putting fences on property boundaries without the township's knowledge. People were going over their boundary line, and so before you didn't even need a permit. So when this section got amended, it was now, okay, the township is going to start issuing permits to avoid people putting fences on land that they don't own. That's part of the reason why the fence permit came in. I don't know, I'd have to talk to Brian about whether he thinks it's necessary. Like, I could put what I'd call like a decorative wall on the back of my patio.
So don't we have an example of a wall that was installed without, it wasn't a retaining wall?
It wasn't it?
It needed a building permit.
Then we've
It was a
got,
retaining wall, I thought.
we have examples of the township, someone built a wall without getting a permit, and it may not be 4 feet high. So I don't know why we don't want consistency here between the two fences and walls when it comes to needing a zoning permit.
That's fine. I mean, that's a policy call. I don't know.
I would still like to see all freestanding walls, comma, regardless of height, comma, and retaining walls. I understand that the retaining walls may be different than a freestanding wall. Or, it's up to you.
I think part of the reason that 4 feet is in there, at least for retaining walls, is under the UCC, correct me if I'm wrong, but under the UCC, anything under 4 feet is exempt from a building permit.
I don't know that.
Which is why I think it has
I
that 4
think that's
foot.
correct.
Yeah.
But I believe what Sean is trying to say is regardless of the height of the wall, a zoning permit, just to make sure it's outside of the right of way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
Yeah.
the yards,
That's fine.
and then therefore 4 feet or above would require the building
Yes.
permit.
Yeah.
If I'm summing it up right?
Yes, you are, exactly.
Hey.
Thank you.
A 3-foot wall, you still want to get the permit for it,
I agree.
regardless.
I might separate out paragraph 3 then to make it very clear.
Yes.
I know what the intent is, but I think with commas and ands, it's going to be a little, it might get lost in translation, so let me shuffle that out.
Okay.
Okay.
So then can we still?
So I would say we should send this to the county planning commission.
With that change?
Yeah, with that change.
Plus the may.
And the may instead of shall.
Okay.
So then somebody want to make a motion then to send it to the planning commission?
I think, do we need to do that motion?
No, I think
Is it
so.
quick-
You don't
authorize it?
really.
No.
Okay. So then we'll send it to the, okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone from the public? Yes,
Yeah, maybe you explain this, but I'm just not
sure.
grasping it. In item 2, B, you have a fence shall be constructed of solid wood or vinyl.
That's what they're saying it's going to change to may.
You're going to add metal to that?
They're going to change may to be may be constructed of solid wood or vinyl.
Okay.
Yeah, and the reason why it was the way it was, the explanation I gave, that somebody came in who lived on a through lot and was not permitted to put a fence in what the township considered their front yard under the code, but what they considered their backyard. And so they said, well, we need it for privacy, and the board at the time said, okay, then put up a fence that really is going to give you that privacy, which is a solid wood fence. So now it's going to be may be constructed. I mean, we honestly don't need to put anything.
No.
We could completely get rid of that
I was
sentence,
gonna
just
say.
get rid of it.
Then why
Because
would
they can do it whatever, they can do it of any material their fence is made of,
Could they?
right?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking maybe match it like 3B where it just says the fence may be solid. It doesn't give a material type, it just says may be
And
solid.
they maybe use it aluminum or something.
Okay. I like that.
Maybe solid?
Yeah.
That's maybe so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shelby.
Any other questions, Steve? No? Okay, so I think that we have our changes.
Can I just make sure I'm clear on the paragraph that Sean was talking about? So freestanding walls regardless of height require a zoning permit. Retaining walls greater than 4 feet require a zoning permit. And all walls regardless of height, or only walls greater than 4 feet require a building permit?
Walls greater than 4 feet. So
Okay.
all freestanding and retaining require a zoning permit. Walls above 4 feet.
Require a building permit.
Require building.
Got it.
Whether freestanding or.
Okay, and I'm gonna break it down exactly like I did in 3 sentences. Okay, thank you. And I'll send it to the county.
No way. Moving on to item number 9, which is a discussion and possible approval of a revised investment policy statement for the West Goshen Township pension plans.
Madam Chair, would you like me?
Yeah.
Would you like me to get back? And then I'll defer to Mr. Walsh as our as the board's pension committee liaison to add anything else that I may miss.
Great.
So before the board this evening is consideration to adopt a revised version of the investment policy statement for the township's pension plans. This was last reviewed and amended by the board in August 2021. With the change from Vanguard to PNC as the township's investment advisor, the pension committee undertook a review of the township's IPS. A small committee reviewed the IPS with representatives from PNC, and I'll note the following, some of the following changes as highlights. Section 5 has been clarified to differentiate the investment advisor and the entity charged with the distribution of funds. For the township, the latter is Bryn Mawr Trust. They handle the distributions to the pension recipients, and when we reviewed this with PNC, there was some questions about kind of the ambiguity, and when Mr. Walsh and I reviewed it, kind of came to the determination that really applied to what Bryn Mawr Trust was doing for the township, so we adjusted it accordingly. We made certain adjustments to the asset allocation section. However, the overall asset allocation target maintains a 70%, 30% split between equity and fixed income that's currently in place. There have been additional restrictions on direct exposure to certain investment types. We had a long discussion about cryptocurrency and making sure that was included in there as exemption because of the volatility that's involved in them. However, and I'll allow Mr. Walsh to correct me if I'm wrong, if they're part of an overall like an overall ETF sort of placement, that would be okay. It's just not direct exposure to them.
Are those common when they're a part of?
I don't believe so, but that was the discussion that we had with PNC. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, the bottom line is it could theoretically happen that there's a cryptocurrency investment embedded in another fund, a mutual fund, or another ETF. But there's no direct exposure to it, and the current portfolio of investments that PNC has put us in does not have that exposure.
Is this kind of just, I guess this is I don't want to call it a problem, but I guess this is something that a lot of people are dealing with, this cryptocurrency and it being a part of.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this whole situation is some pension funds may authorize, some percent allocation of funds into some cryptocurrency ETF, whatever else. It could become part of the investment policy. We do not want it at this time.
Yeah.
The goal with any of these, and I just use that as an example, there were other ones that we looked at, but the whole goal was to not expose the pension funds directly to those types of investments to minimize risk. So the document that's before the board was reviewed at the July 24th meeting of the pension committee and was reviewed by PNC's legal compliance team. So it is before the board tonight for consideration for approval.
Did the pension committee recommend this?
Yes. They reviewed it at their July 24th meeting.
And the legal compliance team had no comments?
They reviewed an initial draft that came out of the subcommittee that looked at it, and we addressed all the comments that came from their legal compliance team.
The document also references what is the legal contract between the township and PNC, which is called the Investment Management Agreement, which Scott weighed in on. That is the controlling legal document. This is a policy that both parties kind of follow.
Scott looked at that?
Yes.
Scott Blissman looked at the legal agreement with PNC at the time they were approved by the board, and they made all the changes. They worked together and made all the changes together.
Okay.
Just curious, the statement retains the asset allocation of the 70-30 differential between equities and fixed income. Was there any discussion about retaining that? Because that actually was an increase which they recommended back in 2021. Now with the stock market taking a dump like it has over the past week or so, there's always that risk there. Was there any concern or any discussion about changing it back to a more conservative approach?
Not with respect to the 70-30 ratio. The 70-30 ratio has really held us in good stead in the last 2023. We just heard from the auditor tonight saying that exposure gave us a boost around our funding levels. So long term, this is an in perpetuity investment, so you want the greater returns that you get from equity exposure, but not going so far that you have the volatility issues of having it completely exposed like we've just seen in the last week. So the main issue around the pension committee was the exposure to non-US equities and the percent that the asset allocation table allowed PNC to do. And we discussed that and the pros and cons of it, and ultimately decided that this current target and minimum maximum range was acceptable, was to be recommended. The one thing that is new, I believe, is REITs, so real estate investment trusts were added. There's no target that there would be an investment in those, but PNC believes that it could be useful to the portfolio to enhance returns over a longer period of time if there is an opportunity to invest in, for example, a REIT ETF, where you might say that commercial real estate has got more upside. It's been under a lot of pressure recently since COVID, but there's new uses are found for commercial real estate. It could be an attractive investment vehicle, so that's why something like that was added into the asset class mix.
And then looking at the asset location, the table that you're talking about, why would and I just want to know, why would the maximum for the high yield be 5% with zero target? Can you explain that?
So high yield fixed income is risky. You have a lot of potential defaults on payments of high yield debt that companies have, or companies that issue high yield debt. So you never want to have a large exposure to it, but there might be some opportunities where you say 2 or 3% in the portfolio could be an attractive place to be. So for example, during an extended US economic growth situation, as we've had in the recent past, where interest rates have been low, you've been able to access, you could have invested in high yield, so you've got more income from fixed income debt opportunities in high yield than you would have in US Treasuries, for example. And because the economy was good, the risk of default was low, so it would have been a better return than just sticking it in regular corporate debt.
Okay. Good.
So I would like to make a motion to approve the revised IPS.
I'll second.
All right, thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on the approval of this revised investment policy? Yes, sir?
Hi,
Hi.
Ed Vinca. Do you allow your fund manager to do EFTs in your pension funds?
ETFs, did you say?
Or ETFs?
Yes.
So they do day trading?
No.
But that's what that's for.
No. Did you say, I'd say ETF, so an exchange traded fund like an S&P index fund can be an ETF, and that's acceptable.
I understand, but that's a day trading instrument.
Well, it's actually trading all the time.
Right.
Yeah. So an S&P index fund is traded all the time, an ETF.
Am I confusing funds?
I don't know. I don't know if we're talking about the same thing or not.
The ETF, if I put an order in at 2 o'clock, I
Yep.
get the price at 2 o'clock.
You do.
I put it in at 10 o'clock.
You get it at 10 o'clock.
I get that price.
Yeah. So we have purchased an ETF of an S&P index fund, invested whatever percent of the portfolio is allowed in it, and it is sitting in our portfolio and is valued every day to that price. So when we get a quarter return, it's whatever happened in that quarter.
So you're paying brokerage fees on
No,
those
we
trades?
do not pay brokerage fees. We pay an investment fee, advisor fee, and whatever.
And what's their management rate?
I believe it's 18 basis points.
18 basis points annually.
It seems
That's
like
the question.
it seems like ETFs is a risky opportunity.
I'm not sure we're talking about the same investment. We're not talking about a crypto ETF or whatever else. We're talking
Right.
about mainstream ETF.
If you want to follow up, maybe you can follow up with
Yeah, if you have a
John
specific
after.
question, just fire me an email.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Okay, any other comments? No, hearing none, then let's take a vote. All in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 5-0. We'll move on to item number 10, which is the discussion and possible authorization to sell the following items owned by West Goshen Township on municipal. The 2014 Caterpillar wheel loader, 2016 Ford F-350, 2018 John Deere Gator XUV 825E, and to rebid the following items: the Billy Goat leaf vac, Honda snow blower, and Gravely brush hog. Mr. Bayshore, do you care to expand on this?
Yes, Madam Chair. So before the board this evening is consideration to authorize the sale of the items that were listed. 3 of those items were bid out earlier this year in the large bid that the board authorized. However, the winning bidder for those items chose never to respond to our request to come pick them up, make a payment, or have any communication with either myself or John Weddy in our Public Works Department. So we're going to rebid those items, starting them at the winning bid amount from earlier this year. So we're not going to lower anything. We're going to start them at where they won before, in the hopes of making the value go up a little bit more. Because they did see a lot of activity. But we reported the individual to municipal bid, and we have everything set to relist. The 2014 Caterpillar wheel loader, there was a new wheel loader that was allocated in the 2024 budget that has been delivered and is in service, so we're ready to sell the existing wheel loader in the streets department. The 2016 Ford F-350, we replaced that vehicle in the 2024 budget, so this would be to sell the vehicle that's currently in stock. And then the John Deere Gator, the wastewater department has a Gator allocated in the budget, so we are going to be selling this one from 2018. Mr. Weddy put together an estimated value for all of these items based on research that he completed. So we will list them on municipal and bring them back to the board for final approval.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any kind of ramifications for somebody who bids on these items and doesn't pick them up?
They get permanently banned from municipal.
They do?
Yes. I report them to municipal, and municipal logs their username, and they get permanently banned.
Are these bots, or do you think they're really people?
They have actual names. That's all I can go off of. And email. When we get the whole bidder list, I get their name, their email address, where they're located, and their phone number. And we've tried. John and I both tried contacting them through numerous methods. And
How many
didn't
times has this
respond.
happened?
Twice.
In the last?
Since I've been here, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
There was one with a police vehicle, and then this group. It was the same person that won all 3 of these items.
Okay. It's a shame.
Chris, I have a question related to, we're going to list these 3 items for rebid with a minimum bid based on the previous bid price.
Correct.
What are we doing with the vehicles, the Gator? Are we going to have a minimum bid price on those? Is there a reserve price or anything?
I do not put a reserve price on there. We've traditionally actually had very good luck with our vehicles and our large size equipment. Municipal recommends starting at 20% of the estimated value. So I generally start them at 20% of the high end of the range that John gives me. And again, we were very successful like with the wastewater pump truck in 2022, pretty much all of our trucks. And I think that's a testament to how much we put into our equipment. And these, I believe the estimated prices that John provided all came from similar types of equipment that were sold on municipal.
Just remind me, do we always have the right to not sell at a price?
The board always has the option not to award.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, for the Gator, we were talking about getting a couple of Gators for this Greystone Park that we're going to acquire, sooner or later. Could this be utilized for one of those Gators?
I had given that some significant thought, and I spoke with Christine about that. Since that Gator was purchased with money from the sewer fund and allocated for the sewer fund, and that's a general fund asset, the parking in Greystone, the general fund would essentially have to purchase that item from the sewer fund, because the sewer fund acts as its own line of business as an enterprise fund. So we'd have to actually purchase it from the sewer fund. It would be kind of like using sewer fund money for a park asset. So probably the best course of action would be to sell it.
mean, is it in good shape?
As far as I know, it's in good shape, and the only item that needs to be done to it is a replacement of the windshield, which I did have John estimate to be $1,600 to replace it. So there is a new gator in the budget. I don't believe Mike has purchased that yet. We could sell it and see what kind of price we get for it on municipal, and then the board always has the option. We could list it, and then the board always has the option not to award it.
How much are John Deere Gator run of that particular model? Any idea?
I believe the budget estimate for the gator was $22,000, but I could be wrong.
So we buy this from the sewer department for $4,300, we would save this money.
I mean, what's the issue with just buying it with one, like fund, like from another fund?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to talk to Christine.
Okay.
Well, it's something to consider. I mean, if we can save some money here just by transferring one asset from sewer department to Parks and Rec.
Versus buying a whole new one, which is
If it's in good
22.
shape.
And I agree that I think the general fund could purchase it from the sewer fund.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
is
it would be,
possible.
I would do it based upon, and actually, there's probably a way that it could be donated. There's some things where you don't have to, but if you were going to purchase it, you felt that you needed to reimburse the sewer fund for it, for an asset that was in the sewer fund, I would do based on the estimated value that Plus Works is giving you.
The other issue that Christine raised to me was a Gatsby issue, because the asset's been depreciated in the sewer fund since it's been acquired, so the value of it's gone down in the sewer fund, so it would create a Gatsby issue. She said this did occur previously, going from the sewer fund to from either, I think it was the police department to the wastewater. She said there was an issue with it previously.
With the depreciation?
Well, it gets depreciated through
What's
Gatsby, General Accounting Standards
So I
Board.
think as long as the sewer fund had some revenue coming from it, just like they're gonna sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had the right to depreciate all of that during those years. Now,
Yes.
they don't own it anymore, so if they sold it to the township or to somebody else, the same category would
It
apply.
might be, again, it might be a situation where you put it on municipal. It doesn't cost us anything to put it on municipal, because I'm gonna do the legal ad with every single item. So it's gonna be one cost for a legal ad. It's not, each thing's not advertised individually. It doesn't cost us anything listed on municipal. So it's really no loss to the township. If you wanna see what the price comes back in, then you can always make the option not to award it.
So just so I'm clear, this is not, this is in good shape, it's not beaten up because it's been on sewer department duty, it just needs a new windscreen.
As far as I know, it only needs a new windshield, and the price for that was $1,600.
Thanks.
Well, we need that price anyway, because we need to know how much it's gonna be worth to pay the sewer authority.
That gives you a real market price on what the value is, because I don't know how to value this.
Yeah, so we need it anyway, so that's what we put it on,
And
see
again-
what we get, and then if we decide to sell to the sewer, now we have a price, or they decide to sell to us, now we have a price.
And again, truly, the only cost to the township is the legal ad, and it's one big legal ad for everything.
Yeah, I think we should list it, and see, and then decide.
Good point, John, thanks.
And we can choose not to award.
Right.
You can choose not to award it. You always have that option with any of these bids.
So is that what we're gonna do then?
Yes, I think we make a motion based on what we just said, and I will make that motion.
Based on what we just said, okay. thanks.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Yes, Dr. White.
The Billy Goat leaf vac, is that in good shape?
As far as I know, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to check the listing. Most of our equipment is generally in very good shape.
And they're selling it because
It hasn't had, from what I understand, it hasn't been used in a long time, and it's just taking up space. They would keep a lot of equipment, we would keep a lot of equipment for spare parts, and it just hasn't been utilized for a long time. We did this was included in a large bid that the board authorized in April or May of this year.
So if we put a bid on it for this municipal and we get it awarded, can we check it out and see if it starts?
We have a public open house for these items. The bids are advertised generally for a 30-day period, and we usually have 2 public opportunities for people to come here and look at the equipment that's for sale. And that's all in the ad that's done.
So if you want to go through municipal to do this as a resident, you sign up on municipal, and then I guess you leave a deposit with them, or?
There's an 8% buyer's fee. So the buyer pays 8% based on the winning bid amount.
Okay, so the fire fee is based on the starting bid?
It's based on the winning bid amount. So if you're the winning bidder, and let's say your bid is $500 and that's what you win it at, then you pay 8% to municipal bid.
To hold it?
As a service.
As a
to sell
service
it,
fee.
Like a broker fee.
Yeah,
The 8% of that to municipal?
that goes directly to municipal.
And then,
500 comes to the
and
township.
then it's 500, so it's 500 plus 8%,
Correct.
or whatever it is.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? No, hearing none, okay, we have a motion and a second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, hearing none, the motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item number 12, which is 11. The possible appointment of Aubrey Gruwell-Keating as Deputy Zoning Officer.
So Madam Chair, before the board this evening is consideration to appoint Aubrey Grell-Keating as a Deputy Zoning Officer for the Township. Ms. Grell-Keating started with the Township as a permit coordinator in June of 2024. She possesses an active building code official license. Since her start with the Township, she has been assisting in enforcement efforts with our zoning officer, Shelby Smith, specifically enforcement of violations of the property maintenance code. Additionally, the individual previously in this position also previously served as a Deputy Zoning Officer for the Township as well. So this is consistent with past practice of the Township.
Okay, great. Does the board have any questions or comments about the appointment of Aubrey as Deputy Zoning Officer?
Would this necessitate a change in her category, her pay category?
No.
No changes in pay rate?
No.
Do you have any comments, Shelby?
Aubrey has really enjoyed learning the township and different areas of the township. We're a very big township, so getting out of the office is nice. And she has definitely taken hold of the property maintenance portions. We've gone out probably half a dozen times now. So she's definitely looking forward to doing some extra work.
She's excited about it.
She is excited about some extra work.
And I believe she just completed a 3-week webinar on zoning enforcement.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, good, so she's getting all the access to all the training that she needs and everything, that's good, okay. So then would somebody, do we have to approve this? I guess we do. Would somebody like to make a motion to appoint Aubrey Gruwell-Keating as Deputy Zoning Officer?
So moved.
All right, thank you, is there a second?
Second?
Thanks, Nate. Is there any public comment on the appointment of Aubrey? Okay, hearing none. Then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, hearing none, motion carries. Congratulations to Aubrey. And moving on to item number 12, which is the possible appointment of Irene Benjamin to the Historical Commission. Mr. Bayshore?
Madam Chair, before the board this evening is consideration to appoint Irene Benjamin to the Historical Commission. I provided a copy of the application information that was submitted. Ms. Benjamin met with the members of the Historical Commission at their meeting on July 24th, and they did recommend her appointment. If appointed, Ms. Benjamin would complete a term that expires in January of 2026. Please be advised that there is still one additional vacancy on the Historic Commission, also for a term that expires in January of 2026.
Nate, do you have any comments?
Yeah, having met Irene, I think she will be a welcome addition to the Historical Commission. So I'm all in favor of it.
Excellent. Any other questions from the board? No? Okay, does somebody want to make a motion to appoint Irene Benjamin to the Historical
I'll
Commission?
make that motion.
All right,
Second.
thank you very much. Is there a public comment on the appointment of Irene? No, hearing none. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item number 13, which is the approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes from July 2nd, 2024. Does any member of the board have any major corrections or changes or questions about the meeting minutes?
I have one question on page 2. It's the 5th paragraph from the bottom that starts with Ms. Smith. And it's the second sentence. It says, Mr. Mundy stated that the current impervious coverage is approximately 13%, and it will be 35% with the proposed plan. That does not seem accurate.
I think it was supposed to be 31%.
That's the only correction I had.
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Okay. So we corrected that. Any other questions or corrections? Okay, hearing none. Any questions, or I'm sorry, somebody want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the
A
minutes.
second.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the public on this motion? No, hearing none. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries 5-0. And finally, moving on to item number 14, which is the approval of the bills to be paid for the general fund, the sewer revenue fund, the waste and recycling fund, and the capital reserve fund. Does anyone have any questions for the bills from any of these funds? Hearing none? No questions? Okay. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the bills?
I'll approve it. I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you very much. Is there any questions? Are there any questions for the bills to be paid? Okay. Then all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. The motion carries 5-0. And would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Is there all second? I'll second the motion. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Have a good night. Good night.
Be safe, everybody. Crazy storm.
Until Sunday.
That's true. Trying to stay out there, but we have to call it. A-Lot. It's A-Tree.
Because I like
Oh, yeah. Like to watch it. Like to watch it. Yeah, Russ